Welcome back to Reform Custom Builds. Today we're going to be starting on an epoxy wood pallet table. So I'm very thankful that you guys joined us today. You will see me setting out the plywood, which is what I'll be using for the form this time. Sheathing tape from Lowe's, and there's my little helper, Landon, always around to help me out and get things rolling and smooth, make sure that I'm doing it correctly. So what you do is you stretch the sheathing tape across, make sure that you're pressing it down. And the reason for the sheathing tape, if you're not using melamine or melamine, depending on how some people pronounce it, is that it is a release agent because epoxy will not stick to it. But if you leave any little gaps or pockets, just keep in mind that epoxy will roll underneath just about anything. Anywhere that water can get, epoxy will get. And whatever form you leave on the bottom is what it's going to take shape of on the bottom of the epoxy. So make sure that you take the time, lay it out straight, smooth, press it down, double check it, and cover everything so you don't have an oops on where the epoxy sticks and have a hard time releasing it. In a little bit you'll see how well this works. Now if I was using melamine, I would not use the tape. I would only use a release agent, which my particular release agent is the Minwax finishing paste wax. It seems to make it release very well. Smooth it all out, just double check it, rub your hands over every bit of it, try to make sure that you don't have anything sticking up or lines up, anything for it to run under or stick to. Now we're gonna have to put the sides on. I'm gonna grab one side, a couple of clamps, my square to make sure that we are going in the right direction. Actually, at this moment, I'm just checking to make sure that I cut this piece of plywood square, so I can use two sides to make sure it stays square, and then only have to square up the other two sides. So I'm going to put it here, I'm going to clamp it in position. I will pre-drill roughly about 8 holes, and then go back through and drop screws in each and every one of those holes, pulling it nice and tight. Don't overdo it, you don't want to split the wood. Pull my clamps off, rotate it over, pull out my 12-inch speed square, one side piece, two side pieces, set them all out, and I'm going to go ahead and pre-drill and screw the ends in, and then square everything up, drill from the, or pre-drill from the bottom and put screws into the bottom. And if you notice, I kind of look over my tape before I ever put it back or put it on, before I screw anything on. I'm always looking at the tape, trying to make sure that there's nothing that I'm missing. All in all, I get to work on these projects a couple hours a night, an hour to a couple hours a night, after I get off of my day job. And so, like, this project specifically took me a good 2 weeks worth of time, 2.5 weeks worth of time in order to actually get it complete. I've been dropping some little snippets here and there on shorts and in my Instagram page, showing you guys updates and kind of prepping you for what I was doing. And today we are releasing the full video. On molds, take your time, make sure that they're square. This way your project's going to come out right. Double check your tape, like I've already said a few times. Evidently that's pretty important to me, making sure that your tape is good. And that is my little tube of silicone. I don't get the big deals of it because it doesn't take a whole lot to silicone the inside of this, but anywhere that water could run out of the box or the mold, you want to make sure that it has silicone on it. And you want to give it its hour or two to actually dry and set up. So you'll see me putting the silicone in, and then you will see me going back. I use my finger to wipe it off. I know that there are special tools out there that you can use to make it beautiful and perfect, but I keep in mind that beauty and perfect on the bottom is not going to help me, because I still have to clean it all up on the bottom anyways, and that's a lot of sanding and prep work, and I still have to cut the whatever the project is, in this case the table, down to its final size. So my box is about an inch bigger in length and in width. And there you go, all smoothed up, silicone tight. Decent little bead for finger work. That is my pallet wood, so I set my boys to a job. I pulled a couple pallets up and said, here you go, here's a Sawzall, a reciprocating saw, and a jigsaw. Take me out some chunks, don't leave any nails in it, and let's go. My colors here, the 28 mica powder colors for Magic Fly. I'm going to use the gold green because I asked my wife what color would go best inside the house with our setup, and that was the color that she said. So that's what I'm going to mix up here with the super clear tabletop epoxy for my base. And it does turn out to be really, really cool looking, but I'm one of those people who loves to see epoxy being mixed up anyways. Take your time with the epoxy, scrape the sides, stir slowly, and let's pour. Slow motion. Man, that stuff's cool. I know some people don't think that the woodworking side of it is going to include epoxy, because epoxy is not woodworking. You're just pouring a liquid in and letting it dry to basically a hard plastic. But epoxy is like a finish with woodwork. It brings certain projects to life. There are certain projects that don't ever need to have epoxy in them. Tables, though, they can be a whole nother animal that just looks absolutely beautiful depending on what you decide to do. I love to see river tables, and in this case I have lots of little rivers and streams running through it, though I wouldn't classify this as a river table. It is my epoxy pallet wood table that's going to be an entrance table in our house. Now you see me pouring it pretty much in all of the cracks, and it's getting all over the top of the wood. No fear there. I am going to go back, I'm going to scrape, and then I'm going to sand the tops of this before I pour another layer on. And I sand with my grinder with a 30 grit wheel on it, taking it down, and then I'm going to go in and I'm going to actually apply some stains to the wood. Always run your torch, pop your bubbles, go slow. Just keep in mind though that you're not trying to heat the epoxy, you just want it to release the air that is coming up in it. And when you're pouring on wood that is not coated in any way, it is not sealed in any way, you're going to end up with some bubbles. So take your time, pop them about every 10 to 15 minutes, check it again. I had some stubborn bubbles that I thought for a minute I was not going to get out, and then they came out. So there you go. I have sanded it down, beat it, used a grinding wheel to put some marks in it, and some other tools to put marks in it, and put stain on each one. And now I'm going in with a liquid glass deep pour epoxy, and it's going to be clear. This is just to bring everything up above the wood just so slightly. So it's about a 3/4 to a 5/8 inch pour. Move my epoxy around. Make sure everything's getting even coating. Also, another tip is always make sure that your forms are leveled out. This way that the epoxy will flow in all directions. You can help it get to each end, but it should spread on its own and level itself out. Looking kind of cool, but look at those bubbles. Now we pop. Oh, look at that. So satisfying to see the bubbles just disappear and everything start to look like glass. Shiny, pretty. I think the hardest thing about epoxy is having to wait the time out. Depending on what you're pouring, you pour a tabletop like we did the bottom and you're waiting 24 to 48 hours, sanding in between, and then if you pour a deep pour, you're waiting 72 hours to up to 7 days for it to get solid enough to mess with. And before I can pour anything else on this, let's pop that bubble. Go away. There you go. All right, before I can pour anything else on this, I've got to pull it out of its mold and sand it down. But even that already looks really good. The reason that I want to put a tabletop epoxy over the top of this deep pour is, from what I understand, and I'm not a chemist in any way, and I don't know how all the chemical compounds react and interact with each other, is that a tabletop epoxy hardens stronger than a deep pour. So I've got a tabletop at the bottom, I've got a deep pour in the middle. I'm going to also put another tabletop on the bottom and another tabletop on the top, all in clear. Multiple rounds of epoxy, multiple days. This is why it takes a little while. And you can't just walk away from epoxy and leave it until you have made sure that your bubbles are gone. Always make sure your temp is right. This super clear calls for 70 to 78 degrees. That was 77. The majority of the time it was floating around 72 degrees inside of the shop. Temperature does make a huge difference. You can end up with divots and cracks and everything else if you don't watch the temperature inside of your pouring area. Some guys have the ability to control the environment and have a separate room specifically for their pours. I don't have that. I have to pour it in my shop. So I have a window unit in my shop, and here we go. Look at that. A few little smacks and it comes straight off. Easy as easy gets. Watch this one. Pop, 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 and fall. That's why you use the sheathing tape or the house wrap tape. It works wonders. Now, I did buy the legs from the big box store Lowe's, and then just got the boards that I did there, and I put a rabbit, a dado, whatever the technical word is for that. It came with the screws on the top that you're supposed to mount. I didn't like that because it would offset the table legs from the tabletop. So I put it together that way with glue. And now we are pouring the top tabletop. I apologize, I did not get video of the bottom whenever I was doing it, but I did sand down. I only hit it with 80 grit. I sanded everything down with 80 grit. Also had to remove a bug that decided to stick in there. And I've mixed up, for this specific pour, a gallon. Is that right? No, sorry, I apologize. 96 ounces of tabletop pour, and you will see the blue tape around the bottom. That is stuck to the bottom to keep drips from forming on the bottom. So whenever your epoxy starts to set up and it gets to the point to where that it's just barely falling, barely just hanging there, not dripping like you see here, you pull the tape off And then all you got to do is go back with a scraper and run it under the edge 2 or 3 times, once every 10 to 15 minutes, and you won't have the bubble formation, and you won't have to do the sanding on the bottom of it to get rid of it. Burn out your bubbles, take your time. Once again, about every 10 to 20 minutes, come out, check it out. Make sure there are no bubbles that are in it. I did round over all of the top edges with a 3/4 inch round over bit in my router. And it is looking really, really good. Which now leads us to the point to where we're going to see. So in that part, sorry, I was noticing that the coverage was not coming down on that side, so I went and got a cheap brush and brushed it over so it covered. This is what the finale looks like. Set up. Looking good. Give me your thoughts and your comments. I want to know what you think. How do you think the epoxy pallet wood table turned out? Would you have done anything different? Would you change anything? Would you have painted the base? Or would you leave it natural with just a sealant? Would you stain it? Also, do me a favor. Hit that like button at the bottom. Hit that subscribe button so you can see what's coming up next. I am in the works of an epoxy chessboard with a few different woods in it and chess pieces. Let me know. Thank you guys for watching to the end.